Hello, North Crawford staff. This is Brandon Munson. I hope everyone is having a great summer and finding some time to do some of those things that you don't normally get the chance to do. Coming at you this morning with some updates on our North Crawford reopening plan for the fall. We are getting set to take this plan to the school board this coming Monday for their review and approval. And so, out ahead of that, we wanted to make sure that we got some of this information out to all of you as staff members, and we will be asking for some of your feedback. So, I just want to run through the slide deck that we will be using to present to the school board. I will be going through some of these slides a little bit quicker. Just because your principals will be providing some additional detail as far as what is concerned at the specific building level. So let's go ahead and jump in. First and foremost, just wanted to talk about how we got to the point where we're at right now. And first and foremost, I can't express enough the gratitude and thanks that need to be shown to our reopening advisory committee. So we put together a committee of staff members back in the spring, and this group assisted us in working through this process pretty much through the entire month of June, oftentimes meeting 2 to 3 times a week to do some of this important work. I also listed on this slide just some of the resources that we've used to help us in our guidance, in some of our decision making. Feel free to click into those resources. I'm sure many of you have seen bits and pieces of all of those, but those were helpful guidance and resources for us as we created our plan. Talk about a few goals and priorities. First and foremost, our biggest priority this year in reopening our building on September 1st is the safety of our staff and students, and we cannot overlook that fact. The difficulty becomes we also have a priority, and I think we can all agree that the best thing for kids right now is to be back in school, learning face-to-face with our teachers and our staff. Well, those two things seem to conflict with each other a little bit. So our job with our reopening plan was to try to find a happy medium, try to find a way to get kids into the building, learning face-to-face as much as possible, but also trying to prioritize not only the student safety, but also our staff safety. So a couple of really difficult priorities and goals there. We also, obviously, a goal was to develop a plan, again, using some of those different pieces of guidance that were provided to us, and to provide coherent instruction that is flexible between face-to-face, blended, and distance learning. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes here. And of course, the disclaimer at the bottom of this is, while our district is utilizing an array of safety protocols, there is an inherent risk of acquiring COVID-19 on school grounds or on school transportation, meaning that we cannot at any point in time 100% guarantee, no matter what kind of processes we have in place, safety measures we put in place, there's just no way for us to guarantee that there's not going to be exposure to this virus. Real quickly on continuation of services, won't spend a lot of time on this right now and get into detail, but we're going to try to make things as normal as possible. Obviously, still providing many of these important services. You can see the list there. The one that I really wanted to focus on, and we do have a slide later on in the presentation in regards to this, but is the student support services piece, social emotional learning, counseling, and referral services. One thing that we know for sure is that this has been a very difficult stretch of time for our students and for our families. And we know that many of our students are going to need additional support when we do return to school in the fall. So we're going to make sure that we have that support available for them, whether it's with our counselors, obviously our staff, continuing with a lot of the social emotional progress that we've made the last year or two here. Some of the learning models. So when we entered this, there's really 3 models that we really had to look at and consider. And the first one is a full in-person, and that would be where we decide we're bringing all students and all grade levels back into the building full-time. On the other end of the continuum is the full distance model, where basically, as we did in the spring, all of our students, all grade levels, would be participating in distance learning. And then there's kind of the middle ground between those two, which you could call it the hybrid version or the blended version. But basically, that's where we have students in the building for face-to-face instruction for a part of the time, and we have students doing some distance learning for the other part of the time. There are many different ways that you can structure that hybrid model. There's several different, some districts are looking at doing it week to week, A week, B week. Some are doing every other day. Others are doing part of a week in another part of the week. Where our committee settled on and felt it would be most effective for our district is we are going to look at bringing our pre-K through sixth grade students in the building 4 days a week. So they'll be there Monday, Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays, and they will participate in distance learning on Wednesdays. And then our 7th through 12th grade students will be in the building 2 days a week, either Monday and Tuesday or Thursday and Friday, and we'll be distance learning the other 3 days of the week. And we'll get into a little bit more detail on that. And your principals will certainly be following up with all of you to talk more specifically about the processes and procedures at your specific building level. So again, as a committee, we settled on the hybrid model. We felt that was most appropriate to begin the school year in our school district. So again, the important piece to this, and it was a part of one of our goals, was flexibility. It's been made very clear to us that at any point in time, we need to be able to pivot and move into a different model. So for example, for us, we're starting with the blended model. We need to be able to pivot quickly if the circumstances were to warrant it, that we may need to go to full distance. Or maybe we can go the other direction. Maybe after a few months, we've monitored situations and working with county health department, maybe we can start bringing kids back into the building more each week for face-to-face instruction. Point being is we have to have processes as a district set up so that we're not caught with our pants down, so to speak, like we were back in March, and we're able to pivot rather quickly into one of those other models if the situation dictates that we do so. The hybrid weekly format, a little bit more detail here. So as I stated in the elementary, our 5K through 5th grade students will be in the building 4 days a week, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. Our 4K schedule will switch a little bit. So students will come to school on either Mondays and Thursdays or Tuesdays and Fridays, with Wednesday being their outreach day. And then all students will have distance learning on Wednesdays. Middle and high school is built pretty much the same or structured the same. So we decided that it was important for our 6th grade, because that is a pretty big transition year, to have them in the building as much as possible. So our 6th graders will be here Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, with distance learning on Wednesdays. 7th grade will be here Mondays and Tuesdays, along with our 9th and 10th graders. And then on Thursdays and Fridays, we will have our 8th graders, 11th graders, and 12th graders in the building. And again, the entire district will be on distance learning on Wednesdays. And we'll talk about that structure a little bit. Again, I don't want to get too much into the weeds on specific structures within each building. I know the principals are planning on following up with all of you in regards to this. But what I do want to say is our number one goal really going into this was to try to keep our groups as small as possible and to try to utilize the cohort model, especially at the elementary. And really the reason for doing that is to decrease the potential exposure of our students. The more students and staff they come into contact with on a daily basis, the greater the risk of exposure for our staff and students. But also, if we get into a situation where we do have a positive case identified in the building, whether it's a staff member or a student, we need to be able to easily contact trace that person. So meaning, who has that person been in direct contact with over the last several days? And if we have students that are coming into contact with a whole bunch of other students or a whole bunch of other staff, that's going to make that process really difficult and might end up leading to a situation where we would just have to shut down, the entire elementary school, for example, or possibly in certain circumstances, the entire district. So it's important. The theme you're going to see here is trying to maintain smaller class sizes, maintain that cohort model, really limiting exposure of students and staff to the least number of people as possible. Not easy to do, but that is our goal going into this. So I'm going to just kind of skip through these slides a little bit. All of this will be shared with you, so you're welcome to look through all of this at your own leisure. But I just wanted to touch base on that real quickly with all of you. So I'm going to go through this again. Your principals will be following up with you with more detail and a lot of those specifics within each of your buildings. So I did talk briefly about the Wednesday being a distance day for the entire district, and this is an area that we honestly went back and forth with quite a bit as a committee and as an administrative team, and we ended up settling on students will be out of the building on Wednesdays. Staff will still report to work on that day. And there's a lot of things that we're going to try to accomplish on those days. Meeting with small groups of students if needed, giving support to students on that day. Of course, all of this being done virtually. Students will still have expectations of completing assignments and activities virtually, or it might be through a packet, maybe, I guess, depending on what level it is. We also see this being valuable time to do some staff development on these days in areas that, whether it's virtual education or some of the different platforms that we're using. We plan on using some of this Wednesday time for some PD. One of the big pieces here is it's no secret that this is going to be a very difficult year for everybody. There's a lot of responsibility being placed on all of you as staff members. And we don't want to overlook that fact that teaching is a very, very difficult thing under normal circumstances. And we know that we're coming back to school under less than ideal circumstances. And that's going to be very stressful at times, very emotionally taxing at times. Not to mention, just due to the schedule itself, your time during the day is going to be very taxed and is going to look very different than it has in the past. We want to make that Wednesday a day that staff have some time to themselves to do some of that important planning and lesson development. And I think that's going to be some very important time, really for everybody's well-being moving forward. So you can see, some other ideas using that Wednesday. Still a lot to iron out with that, and you'll certainly all be involved in those discussions on specifically what those Wednesdays will look like. The other thing we have to recognize, and we know this from a survey that we did several weeks ago with our families, is that it is highly likely that we are going to have families that are going to choose a full virtual option, meaning they just don't feel safe to send their children back into school right now. Or maybe they want to take another month and just kind of see how things are going and see how things operate within the building in the district before they send their children back. We need to have an option for those families. And so right now we are currently exploring a few different options for North Crawford to be in that virtual environment, and for students that choose to do it full time. That'll look a little bit different than what it's going to look like for our kids who are in person 2 days a week and virtual 3 days a week. So we're still in the exploration stage of that, hoping to have something finalized here in the next couple of weeks with that. But our plan is to be able to meet those families' needs who choose to have their children do a full virtual. Busing, and I won't spend a lot of time on some of these details here, but as of right now, our plan is to still bus kids to school. We're just going to run one bus route, which means that we run the risk of having 40 plus kids on a bus. Obviously, the feasibility of us being able to do physical distancing on a school bus is really, really challenging and difficult. And some might say it just isn't possible to do. For that reason, what we are doing instead is we're going to do temperature checks before the students get on the bus. They are going to be mandated to wear a mask if they ride a school bus. And, we'll see how that works. And, Honestly, this is one of the biggest challenges. Is we know before we can even begin to instruct kids in the classroom, we've got to get them to school, and this is a big challenge for us. So we'll be constantly monitoring this to see how it goes. We'll have some contingency plans in place, but as of right now, this is our plan for transportation. Likewise, students who do not ride the school bus, when they are dropped off at school by a parent, we will be doing temp checks at that time. And students who drive to school or bring younger siblings with them when they drive to school, they will also be temp checked before they enter the school building. This year, we're going to really encourage our parents that they should not be dropping students off prior to 7:50 because we simply just aren't going to be able to have students lingering in hallways, hanging out together in the commons, doing those types of things here. It's really going to be students coming into the school, going straight to their classrooms. Again, we just need to try to minimize that exposure as much as possible. Some dismissal, we're going to work through some of these procedures a little bit more in detail, but we're going to have some sort of a staggered dismissal at the end of the school day for bus riders, for drivers, for kids getting picked up. Again, just so we don't have 460 students all trying to leave the building at the same time. Again, trying to limit that exposure and keep students in as small of groups and cohorts as possible. Food service. So elementary is planning on eating in their classrooms. Again, details will be shared with the elementary staff on exactly what that's going to look like. Middle and high school, Mr. Triplin is working on scheduling 4 different lunch times for the middle and high school. Again, trying to keep those groups as small as possible so we can physical distance the students in the cafeteria and there's not as much crossover of students. And then, of course, we need to make sure that we're being aware that if we are going to have many of our students at home 3 days a week or possibly more, that we need to have an alternative or a solution for those families, for those students to have food. So we will be working with our food service staff on how we're going to get food to those students, whether it be deliveries or take home or whatever that looks like. Health protocols. I'm really excited to announce that our school board has supported hiring a full-time school nurse. That's going to be critical for us this year in the development of many of our protocols as they're related to health and wellness in the district this year. And that person really can be our point person in many aspects of our COVID response this year. So we're working on securing a person for that position right now as we speak. But we are creating a separate nursing station. It'll be in the front hallway where Carrie Davidson's office was, which used to be our IT office, up in the front hallway between the library doors. That will be a separate station used only to assess COVID symptoms. So it's important that if a student is sent to the office with suspected symptoms of COVID, or they come to school with symptoms, or whatever the case might be, that we have a separate area to assess those students. Otherwise, they are going into the office, possibly exposing other staff members or students who might be in the office. So plans are in works of getting that up and running. And then again, we're going to work in collaboration with our school nurse, our county health department, to come up with some specific COVID protocols for the district as we move forward. Face covering. So where we are at with this currently at this time is all students will be encouraged to wear a face covering at all times or as they are comfortable. Again, you will see the word encouraged and not mandated at all points in time. You will see there are points in time where we are mandating it, but it will certainly be highly encouraged. It will be mandated or required for middle school and high school students when they are traveling outside of the classroom. So that would mean possibly during a passing period, when they're going to the bathroom, when they're coming in the building in the mornings, leaving in the afternoons, on their way to and from lunch, things like that. So when they're outside of the classroom. And when they're inside of the classroom, as long as you're able to maintain physical distancing, with the students in your classroom. They're still encouraged to wear the mask, but not mandated to do that. And then, as already stated, any student who does ride the school bus will be mandated to have a face covering on. As far as staff are concerned, what we are mandating is that staff will wear face coverings when you are not able to physically distance yourself from other students and staff. So, for example, if you're in your classroom, students are physically distanced, maybe they're working independently on something, you're maintaining your physical distance from the students, you're welcome to remove the mask at that time. But if you're sitting down with a student working one-on-one, if you're in front of the students and not able to maintain physical distancing, if you're walking around the room to assist students, at that point in time, you will need to have a face covering on. So more to come with that, specifically on what we're talking about, whether that's masks, whether that's shields. We will have some additional guidance for all of you as we get closer to our return. Sanitation protocols. What I can tell you is this is a really important area for us in the district this year, is to make sure that our building is cleaned and sanitized on a regular basis. And I'll be working very diligently with our custodial staff and Harry on making sure that this happens, and making sure that we do a good job of defining whose role is what. So if we're going to have things being cleaned on a daily basis, we need to know for sure, is that the teacher's responsibility, is that the custodian's responsibility, who's going to take care of those different items. So more to come on that. Again, as I had talked earlier, this is a really big area for us this year, the social emotional supports. As we know, this has been really difficult on many of our families, most likely will continue to be a challenge for many of our families into the fall. And so we need to make sure that we have supports in place, and whether that's programs that we're doing within the classrooms, whether it's meeting with students in small groups individually, providing resources to families. Our student services team will certainly be addressing this and coming up with some plans as we come into the school year. Last piece here is concerning athletics and after-school activities. As you can see, this is a pretty general statement here because there's still a lot of unknowns surrounding this. This is a really difficult topic right now for all districts across the state to tackle, and has been a very difficult conversation in our district, in that if we are going to allow students to participate in athletics or after-school activities, does that change anything that we do during the school day? And what I can tell you right now is that all of the bell-to-bell procedures that I just went through will be in place regardless of whether we have after-school activities or we do not. So we are not going to change those at this point in time. However, we do need to recognize that if we do have athletics or other after-school activities, we need to make sure that, again, we have put processes and protocols in place to mitigate that risk for our students. That's going to be a very big challenge, but we will be working collaboratively over the next few weeks to try to make sure that we have things in place. So what are our next steps? So following this presentation, you will have an invitation to a very, very short, brief survey that we would like all of you to click in, complete that survey, preferably by the end of the day on Monday. So that's a pretty quick turnaround. Today is Wednesday. Next Monday night, we have our presentation to the school board. We're going to use the same slide presentation, go into it in a lot more detail than what I just did with all of you, and hopefully get the board's blessings on and approval on the plan. Otherwise, there may be areas that they want us to revise, and we'll certainly take that into consideration. Once it is approved by the school board, then it's a matter of us rolling this out and presenting this to our parents, our students, and our community through some sort of a presentation, mailing, alert, whatever that might look like. And then obviously through the rest of the summer, we still got about a month and a half left before we start school. We need to continue to evaluate things. And as we know, this landscape can change very quickly. The needs within our communities can change very quickly, which may force our hand to make some changes within our plan. And so we will be closely monitoring things through the remainder of the summer leading up to our start date on September 1st. So again, I thank all of you for listening in today. Certainly, please get in, complete that survey. If you have any specific questions, please feel free to email them to myself directly or to any of our administrative team, Kara Wood, Amanda Colleen, or Toby Triplin. We'll get back to you and answer those questions the best that we can. Otherwise, I appreciate you listening. I appreciate your feedback. As always, I appreciate your flexibility. Again, as we said all spring, we're in this thing together, and that's not going to change anytime in the near future. So I wish you all the best. Hope to see and hear from you all very soon, and we will be back in touch.